Welcome to the MrpTech podcast. This is episode 24. My name is Matt, and this is a podcast where I review multiple platforms and technologies to see which works best for me in order to help you. And in the last few weeks, the last few episodes, I have been reviewing an operating system, Linux-based operating system called Solus OS. And this week I'm going to take a turn, and I'm just going to talk about some technology in general. Now, this week's podcast came about as I was at work the other day, and I was talking to a river guide who was an experienced rafter, and he mentioned to me that he had worked in IT for the last 30 years and actually retired as an IT professional. This particular person worked for insurance companies, worked for some very large corporate companies, and eventually spent the last years of his career working for IBM. And as soon as I heard that he was an IT guy, I sort of started questioning him on some of the things that I'm interested in. And I mentioned to him the interest of Linux and other things along those lines. And he mentioned that he worked a lot with Unix, which is where Linux was derived from. So we have a very brief conversation about the things that he did and the programming languages that he used, the things that he would have to do. And one of the things that he reminded me is why I never got into the technology field as a professional. And that was because he would get called at 2 o'clock in the morning to do security patches or upgrades on a system that needed to be up during the day, when everyone needed access to all of the software and computers that he was maintaining. And then after being up at 2 o'clock in the morning, he would go home and get a few hours sleep and be expected to be back at work for 8 o'clock in the morning, where he would then manage any fallout that happened during the last few hours while he was sleeping. So as we're talking about this, we started talking about mainframe computers and how ever since the 1980s, the media and anyone in the know have sort of been proclaiming the death of the mainframe computer. Now, mainframe computers originally, first off, a mainframe computer are those used to be giant computers that would take up a whole room. They were high-speed computers for the time, and it could be sort of a central processing unit for a computer or for numerous workstations. And they were developed, between the 50s and the 70s by IBM and a bunch of other companies. So they were known as IBM and the Seven Dwarfs. So those other companies, NCR, Data, Control Data, Honeywell, General Electric, RCA, and a few other companies. And each of them had their own series of mainframe computers, and IBM sort of became dominant in this area and pretty much launched IBM to the front of any technology companies. And as time went on, there was shrinking demand of these mainframes, mostly because technology was getting better. The mini computers and systems based off of that were growing more sophisticated, and basically the personal computer was making its way in. So by the end of the 1980s, the mainframe computer was declared dead or dying, but in fact that hasn't been the case. The mainframe computer has continued on, and mainframes are still in existence today and actually being used in existence today. Many of these mainframe computers were programmed using punch cards that would put in a program that needed to be run. And so the administrators of these mainframes would have to use punch cards and tell the computer exactly what to do based on what they did with these cards. And 20 years later, after the mainframe was declared dead, IBM still produces mainframe computers. So how can a mainframe be dead after 20 plus years? And the reason is because the technology has changed and mainframes are being used for different things. And today, mainframes have become supercomputers doing scientific research or server farms, collecting our data, storing our data. Things like Amazon Web Services or Dropbox or Google Drive. The mainframe has sort of changed from a computer that was designed to do a few specific things to big data and storage along the way. But even the old mainframe computers are still being used today, and a perfect example of that is actually in the U.S. military. The U.S. military still uses floppy disks in order to coordinate the nuclear weapons that they have throughout the country. And these mainframe computers are not networked, so they're very secure. And even though it's an aging technology, in some cases they're even still using the punch card technologies to maintain security for the country. So this is an obsolete technology that's aging, and they're looking to replace some of these technologies with a digital technology that is secure, modern, and doesn't require that networking that more modern computers have. Many of the technologies that they use are written in assembly. That's a coding language for low-level computer maintenance. So there are still uses for the mainframe, even though it's considered dead. And one of the things that sort of surprised me as I started thinking about mainframe computers is that in more modern times, we're hearing some things like the death of the desktop PC. So we went from a mainframe computer to a desktop computer that instead of filling up a room, maybe filled up a corner of our desk somewhere. And the desktop computer over the last few years has seen a big decline in purchases at big box stores. And researchers have been noticing a decline in shipments in desktop computers over the last few years. And we've seen a wave of purchases for laptops and tablets and smartphones. But still, if you really check the facts behind the decline of desktop computers, it's because a lot of us have desktop computers at home and there's no need to replace them. And when we bought those desktops, it may have been at a different time and we needed the powerful resources of a desktop computer. But now we have more powerful laptops that we are able to use because technology keeps getting better. At the same time, these same companies that are proclaiming the death of the desktop PC don't realize that there's still a market out there for desktops. Anyone who is a gamer will realize that the desktops offer the best graphics cards and the most amount of RAM that you can put into your PCs. So there's still a use for desktops in a gaming environment. If you are a graphics designer or a video editor, you may want a more powerful computer to do those things. But for general use, laptops took over for a few years. So is the desktop PC dead? No, as I mentioned, most people in North America probably already have one or several computers. And PC development has slowed down. But there are constantly new technologies coming out. And our portable devices are now powerful enough to give us quick access to internet and email. And plus, the internet is found just about everywhere you go. So being mobile is something that has taken over the last few years. And we're also transitioning between keyboard and mouse to touchscreen technologies. So as I started reading about the death of the mainframe and then went to the death of the desktop PC, one of the things that I wanted to research is another death in technology that everyone seems to be talking about, the death of the tablet, and the fact that a few years ago, the tablet purchases were skyrocketing, and it was going to kill the personal computer. But now it doesn't really look like that at all. For instance, the iPad purchases have soared for iPads, but now every quarter since 2014, the total unit sales have dropped year after year. Why is that? Well, my opinion is because everybody has a tablet that wants a tablet. And we don't need a new tablet every year, just like we do not need a new laptop every year or a new desktop PC every year. And so sort of what we're seeing is a stabilization of devices that we have in our house. And most people are okay with older technology, and they'll use it until it doesn't work anymore. So with tablets, this sort of scares me a little bit because of an engineered end of life for these devices to make you purchase newer devices. For instance, iPad 1 and iPad 2 are no longer supported. At least I know iPad 1 is no longer supported. You can't do any more updates. You cannot receive any more updates. iPad 2, you cannot receive any more updates, I believe. And as time goes on, the older generations are no longer supported. You don't get updates. And you can't switch out the operating system for something like a Linux-based operating system because the bootloaders are locked on these devices. That's not true for old laptops. Let's say somebody gave me an old laptop that had Windows XP on it. If I really needed to use that hardware, that computer, I could switch Windows XP for a Linux-based distribution that has current security updates and use that if I didn't have money to purchase a new computer. So these arbitrary end-of-life procedures that are taken by companies like Microsoft and Apple, mixed with the locking down of these hardware devices, is really unfortunate, because then you end up with just a brick that doesn't work, that can't be used anymore. And if it does still work and it doesn't take updates, then you're at a security risk, because if you're using an old device that can't be updated, technology is always changing, and your device is insecure. So then I decided, as I'm going down this road, we started with a mainframe, moving on to desktop and laptops and tablets. I wonder if there's anyone out there crazy enough to think that smartphones are dying. And of course, if you look up anything on the internet, you'll find your answers that you were looking for. And sure enough, the article that I came across, why smartphones could be dead in 5 years. So this seems to be a general theme across technology and popular technologies that are being used at a time. And the general rationale behind this train of thought is that in 5 years' time, technology will be changing so rapidly that something else will take over for the popularity of smartphones. Many people happen to believe that artificial intelligence and interactions between those technologies with an artificial intelligence will be the next smartphone, the next more popular item to have. So we'll have objects without the need of a smartphone. We're already seeing Internet of Things devices out there that control our refrigerator, our lights, all connected to the internet. We have things like the Amazon Echo, and Google and Microsoft and Apple all have their personal digital assistants that are basically the start of artificial intelligence. And the whole general idea of artificial intelligence seems to be gaining more and more traction as time goes on. The software and coding behind these technologies keeps getting better and better. We're able to do more than we were just a few years ago with every iteration of Siri or Google Now or Cortana or Alexa. And yes, as all of these technologies change, the uses for these other technologies also changes. So as smartphones become more powerful and tablets become more powerful it does take away from laptops and PCs. However, I still use my laptop frequently. I still use my laptop as a primary working environment. I think of my tablet and my phone as a consumption device where I'm consuming news, email, text messages on the go. But anytime that I want to get work done, I'm still primarily using a desktop at work. I'm using laptops at home, and there is still a use case for these devices. We're still using mainframes today, whether we want to admit it or not. Mainframes, supercomputers have become server farms that store our data. They're not dead. The use case for them has changed. And as time goes on, our smartphones are going to become wearable devices. We're already seeing this with watches and glasses. And soon enough, we may have wearable technology with devices that are embedded into clothing. The technology is always going to change, but there will still be uses for all the older devices that are out there. So are we seeing the death of technology as time goes on? I don't think so. I think we're seeing technology constantly evolving and constantly changing. My worry, though, is this. As we advance to artificial intelligence, are we going to forget how to run things like mainframes, old mainframe computers? Are we going to forget, as the people that managed those mainframes and made careers managing and programming with punch cards, are we going to forget that skill? And we'll still have uses for mainframes, but are we going to forget how they're run? Are we going to forget how to use a keyboard and mouse as we move along to touch devices? Our students today who are being brought up on touch devices, are they going to think of the keyboard and mouse as something ancient? And as we move away from smartphones to artificial intelligence, where we use our voice for commands, are we going to forget how to program and code the very basics behind the technology? I think that's a very big concern, seeing how so much of the world is being run on servers and mainframes and supercomputers. We use so much of our lives working behind a computer at work. Are we going to forget the basics of how the system works as technology gets easier to use and we have to think about it less and more becomes automated rather than something that we build and learn how to use and maintain? Just a concern that I have. I don't know if that's possible. But what comes next after artificial intelligence? Is it a new fad like HoloLens or augmented reality? All these technologies will become popular for a short period of time, but what moves on after that? I don't think I have an answer to that question, but it does keep things interesting. And I love the fact that this all popped up as I had a conversation in general with a person at work who I never really spent much time talking to because I didn't see very often. And just a very brief interaction, a very brief conversation about the death of a mainframe computer got me thinking down these lines of all the technology that we use. So, what do you think? Are tablets and smartphones doomed already? Is the use of laptops or desktops fading away? Or do you think that there's going to be a constant need for some sort of interface that we have at home that stays at home? You can let me know. You can send me an email at mrptechreviews@gmail.com. You can also see my Facebook page. It's facebook.com/mrptechreviews. And you can also see all of my videos on YouTube. This is an audio podcast, and I do post from time to time videos on YouTube. Just search for MrpTech Reviews, all one word. And you could also send me leave me a review on iTunes or any other place that you'd like to download your podcasts. That helps me get more listeners. And if you're a podcast listener and you know other podcast listeners who may enjoy a technology-based podcast, maybe make a recommendation to them to go ahead and listen. I have a slow growing user listener base that is growing week after week. And I'm enjoying doing this, and I hope you're enjoying listening to this podcast as I explore all sorts of different technology. So thanks for listening, and we will see you next time.